Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this whole Israel and Hezbollah situation as the Middle East and all the conflicts are kind of amping up into what seems like to the world a World War III situation. If you haven't heard recently, what's been on the news a lot are some of the surface level sort of hacks and attacks by supposedly, some people say Israel and others saying other forces. And again, you can get into conspiracy, you can get into the escalation of a war through other third parties like the rich elite or the deep state or whatever you want to call it. But people, especially Israel, hasn't specifically come out and claimed the attacks of the walkie-talkies and the pagers. If you haven't heard, thousands of people had their pagers and a day later their walkie-talkies explode almost simultaneously. A lot of people were maimed, their fingers blown off, like at least 10 maybe people died through the explosions. And this was all along the Lebanon region, especially some of the Hezbollah fighters. And people are trying to track this down, saying, has it come from the source, from Taiwan, from Japan, in the sense of the makers of the walkie-talkies and the pagers, or has it been hacked from some country in Hungary or just other people during the shipment route, and what's really going on? So at the surface, people are caught up with some of the actual day-to-day news in what's being portrayed, what's being investigated, and what's happening at the surface level. There's no doubt something's going on, that people are dying, that there's a conflict, and there's some attacks. It's just that the news is portraying certain people, certain groups as being the culprit, whereas it could be, in some sense, something else. And it could also be such that the people that have claimed the attacks may not actually be the people that did the attacks, because we know, those that have researched for a very long time, that all these countries, whether it's Iran, whether it's some of these fighters, whether it's even North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and these guys, they're being controlled by other higher elites, and they're being told what to do in some sense, similar to what's happening with the Diddy stuff. The Diddy, people are waking up to the fact that there are people that were coerced, there were racketeering conspiracies. There's so many things that people were blackmailed in some sense to do. And the same could happen at the country level in what's happening with the Middle East and all of this. And so again, I'm not saying I know what's going on, but people are waking up to seeing more than meets the eye. And so recently we've had just an escalation, deadly missile strikes, Israel in some sense attacking parts of the Beirut area, 45 people apparently killed. Hezbollah apparently launching deep rocket attacks into Israel for in more than, I think, a year now. The first time in a year, Israeli troops storming Al Jazeera in the West Bank and ordering their closure for 45 days. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu delaying his trip to New York for the UN Assembly. Cities in northern Israel near Lebanon closed schools, beaches, outdoor gatherings limited to 10 people, and just this whole facade of an escalation of an all-out war, people from either side, countries, I think like the Prime Minister of Lebanon telling UK that they would fight alongside Hezbollah in this whole thing, and just so many people are taking different parts of this whole thing and putting their color to it in the sense of whether they support Israelis. There's a lot of grouping of things. Anti-Semitism, you have just so many people simplifying the narrative so that they can comprehend and cope with what's going on, as opposed to seeing the deeper levels of the detail. The same happened with the Ukraine and Russia thing. Russia being demonized by the world, whereas people that are researching are finding out about the bioweapons and in some sense the necessary evil to take down these places for which the deep state and these people of power, money launderers and these guys are going in and using Ukraine as a proxy for something bigger. And then the world, because they don't know better, they were simplifying it as, hey, Russia invading Ukraine, stop it. We want to demonize Russia. And Russia the whole time crying wolf, talking about and telling the UN, presenting their findings, whereas the world, the news media are not covering it. The accusations of bioterrorism, these things that they're developing, and they're belonging to these people of the deep state, some people in the three-letter agencies of the US and other places, and others being assets of a country being disguised as world leaders that are doing good. And so the same is happening even in Israel, in the Middle East. We have recently FBI saying that hacked or leaked information of spying on Trump was given to the Biden-Harris administration, and this is done illegally. And Trump is calling people out on it. He's even calling out the people that were stealing the election, and the media is now demonizing him. Recently, he said this, I think, on the 7th, and that Trump would prosecute these people because it's a criminal act. It's an act of treason, and the media is going against Trump and saying, look, he's being a dictator, he's a threat to democracy, and all this stuff. And so the narrative right now is that people are trying to capitalize on the situation to make it look like it's bad when really there's something deeper to it. Again, I'm not saying that killing people and these things are the right thing. It's a singular, unified, linear answer. I'm just saying that there's something more to it, and it's hard for people to comprehend and think about these things without somebody else bantering and going against it and simplifying it and saying, look, Trump, when he's going against evil and the fact that the election was stolen, he's being demonized, and they're taking their arguments and they're projecting in some sense, and they're giving this notion that, no, look, he's the one that's bad because he's saying these things and he's going to tear his opposition down. Look how bad it is. The same thing is happening or happened with Russia, Ukraine, and now with the whole Middle East situation. And so I think that as people are trying to think critically on their own, and they're getting a taste of, okay, it's beyond the singular narrative. It's beyond homogenizing this group of people and thinking that all these people are bad and these people are against these people. Whereas if you think deeper, there are certain people that are corrupted, they're more evil, they're taking advantage of the situation. And then that narrative being seeded into the public, people are thinking deeper and waking up to this fact and then wanting to, out of their curiosity, do more research such that they come to a conclusion that is not being spoon-fed to them by the public. And so this is happening at a rapid pace throughout the world. And even as people in the Middle East, Islam, Arab nations waking up, and a lot of them coming to Christ, coming to know the truth and waking up to the right side, meaning a clear, ethical, moral side, and something that because the veil was torn, God has spoken to them. They can think rationally and they can think in the right way, right? And so this is being done, whether you are a believer or not, to many people across the world, and they're thinking and they're understanding more critically what's happening. And so I believe that something else is happening behind the scenes, as many of us believe. We just don't know exactly what it is, but it's much deeper than the way it's being portrayed in the media. And it is in some sense a necessary evil, just like with what Russia and Ukraine was. We're seeing this play out in and during the term at the tail end of this Biden administration, or quote unquote administration, so that it can be portrayed as Trump coming, ending the war, saving and doing things, prosecuting, doing whatever that is on the surface, because the narrative has to be simple, digestible, palpable for the public, such that when he comes in and actually does the stuff that we are more privy to, whether it's the Q stuff, whether it's this deep PSYOP research we've been doing, whatever it is that we've been looking at, it's more than meets the eye. And to each their own, they will believe and they will get the right info such that we will have, in some sense, conclusion and closure to this whole saga and rid ourselves or the world of the evil that exists right now. So this is what's happening, I believe. And as more people are waking up, to each their own in their respective groups, I call them audience 1, 2, and 3, they will wake up, and there is a point, there is a reason, there is a rhythm to all of this, because it has to be done. This was a necessary way to come to the other side of it without having an actual all-out war for which cities and the world would be damaged. We need to chop the head off the dragon at its source by his neck, such that the rest of the world that's functioning can heal and move on with as little collateral damage as possible. So I believe this is what's happening. More is coming. Love you guys. Be encouraged. Talk to you guys very soon.